Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and as you can see, I have with me a very distinguished soldier, diplomat, and now an educator, Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain. General Hasnain is now the Chancellor of Central University in Kashmir, but prior to that, he served in the Indian military with great distinction, and I will, as we continue with this conversation, I will post some of his achievements. But the most critical aspect for us today is the fact that he has served as the commander of the 15th Corps, which is essentially looked after the Kashmir area, especially the region about which we will be talking today. Today, I'm going to talk about the rather, shall we say, I don't know whether to use the word tragic or egregious episode of a terrorist encounter that took place in Anantnag, which lasted a whole week. It was a 7-day episode, and in which three very senior officers from the Indian Army and police, a major, a colonel, and a deputy superintendent of police were killed, and also another soldier called Pradeep. And this happened in the Anantnag area in Kashmir. So we're going to talk about that. And the General Saab has also written a very powerful article in the Indian Express about this, and we will also discuss some of the content of his article. So welcome to Khanversations, General Saab. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muqtedar Saab. It's a pleasure always to come back to your program, and a big Jai Hind to all my viewers.
Sir, I wanted to understand, like, when you read the media reports, I'm so far away here. So when I'm reading the media reports and I'm trying to talk to experts who might have some knowledge of it, it is not very clear as to how this whole thing simply exploded, right? The media, it started happening in the media with the death of the three officers. So what happened? Did they get actionable intelligence and then they went there? Or they were not expecting the terrorists to be armed? Like, how did it happen that the event began with the killing of three senior military officers, which even though in your article you point out a similar thing happened in 2020, isn't it, where two officers were killed, but it is still quite rare for such senior officers to be killed in these encounters.
Thank you for that question, and very, very relevant question. I'll go a step beyond what I wrote in the Indian Express and say that, yes, we had an encounter in 2020 where we lost similarly a commanding officer and a young company commander. But I think we must have lost 10 commanding officers in the last many years in various encounters across. One thing, Dr. Khan, we got to remember, the Indian Army's ratio of the officer casualties versus the Jawan, the soldier casualties, is perhaps the highest in the world. If you go into the Kargil operations too, you will find similarly. There are lots of claims of this coming from Pakistan also these days. But by and large, this is, I think, a colonial past which continues in a very, very passionate way, where the officer is always up in front. And there's follow the system of, the follow me leadership. It's not something where he's sitting in a supervisory role. He's sitting there right in front to lead the troops into battle. And someone like me who's been experienced in this all my life, I can tell you, when the first shot is fired, everyone goes to the ground. If the officer does not lift up his head and get his men going, no one will be able to lift up their head. So that is a style of command of the Indian Armed Forces in the Indian Army. It is a follow-up, a follow-me kind of a system, which is followed to the book. Now, in this encounter, if these three officers, unfortunately, had not been killed in action, perhaps the encounter may not have drawn so much of international attention to the way it's come to you and to everyone else around the world. It was not a surprise. It was definitely an intelligence-based operation. But when you get intelligence, you get it of a generic kind of a presence of terrorist hideout in a particular jungle. This area of the Pir Panjal is a hugely forested area. And the Pir Panjal stretches from Muzaffarabad up to Kishtwar and a little beyond, is 150 kilometers or more. And in this, there are lots and lots of hideouts. There's a history of hideouts in this area. These are the areas to which many of the Bakarwals go with their sheep during the summer, grazed them, and they have constructed a lot of what are called dhokes, these little hutments on top where these people go and stay. Otherwise, most of the time, these areas are clear of any population, so the terrorists go and find that the most appropriate place to stay. It's not possible to go and clear all those areas all around the mountains. So whenever we get some intelligence, we like to carry out an operation. This was the kind of information you got, and the operation was launched. And while the search operation was going on, there was a contact. And in the contact, it just happened that the officers were well up. And they were the first casualties. The advantage the terrorist has is that he is watching, he is in hiding, while the army is searching and is up and about. They are visible to everyone. So the first encounter, the first shot will invariably be fired by the terrorist. And whatever casualties normally take place in such operations happen in the first 2 minutes of the operation.
Sir, it reminded me, I'm not in a position to critique military tactics. I've never been on a battlefield, but I do remember reading that one of the episodes during the War of Independence here in the US was that one particular American started killing British officers first. And it was considered as against the conventions of war and rules and norms, because what happens is when you kill the officers, then there's no one to lead. And so you don't know how the rest of the conscripts will behave. So it was important for the officers to survive, right?
You make a very interesting intervention, I must say. Very, very interesting. And I'll go a step beyond. It's not just the officer who gets targeted, who got targeted that time and even today. It is also his radio operator. You see, the person who carries the communication equipment, and the most important thing is that the commanding officer is in touch through that radio equipment with his subordinate commanders. So if the radio equipment is damaged, if the commanding officer is hit and his radio operator is hit, the operation virtually gets paralyzed. And that is why this used to happen in the days of the American Civil War, or even before in the War of Independence and things like that. To avoid that, if you notice, I'm not sure about the American armed forces, but the British Army does not wear its ranks on the shoulders in field operations. They wear it on their chest below in a very camouflaged kind of a way. This is something which a lot of other armies are following. The Indian Army is also following it to some extent, not entirely.
Yeah, because especially during the World War I, the trenches, they were targeting, the snipers were always targeting officers. So in the broader context of what really happened is that for the last few months, we have been hearing positive news coming out of Kashmir, and that there are literally crores of tourists who have come to Kashmir. A lot of tourists coming, which means prosperity, creating jobs, creating a better life for Kashmiris. So if you read the reports in the media, etc., it appears as if that the abrogation of Article 370 was somehow magical. Like this line disappeared from the Indian Constitution and suddenly there is peace in Kashmir. It kind of would intuitively suggest that all the Kashmiris wanted was to get rid of the Article 370, and now that it has gone, there is peace. So my question to you is more of like tactical, like what changed on the ground that the violence decreased in such great amount of violence simply disappeared with the abrogation of 370. What was the actual difference in the ground?
First of all, I think it was a very bold decision which was waiting to be taken for a very long time. There were all kinds of apprehensions in the minds of the political leadership, even in the minds of the military leadership. Locally also, if it was removed, it would become the trigger for a massive movement in Jammu and Kashmir, which India could not handle, and that kind of a narrative was built up earlier. I think this government did a good job in assessing. For the first 5 years, they really assessed the situation, correctly read it, had their inroads into various elements within Jammu and Kashmir, and then they went and took the decision on 5th of August. Now, it's an important aspect which I'm pointing out. Unfortunate thing is that a perception got created as if with the lifting of Article 370, the problem of Jammu and Kashmir would be wished away. Now, for the better part of the last 30 years before 2019, this problem had been initiated into a proxy war by Pakistan. And the proxy war rode on what is called an ecosystem. An ecosystem is nothing but networks and networks created. These networks, if you go into it, I can count some of them for you. For example, the overground workers, the financiers, the drug syndicates, the media itself. I'm not sure if people are aware that 32 English newspapers were and are maybe perhaps still today published in Srinagar every morning. That many English newspapers are not published in Delhi. We have also had networks of stone throwers, networks of separatists. You name it and there was a network for it. Western Union money transfer used to have transparent transfer of money into the accounts of various people from all over the Middle East. No one went after them. It's after 2017, the NIA started, the National Investigation Agency went hammer and tongs after it and has been able to marginalize this to a very great extent. Many of these networks have been dismantled, but to think that all of them have gone would be a misnomer completely, which is why I keep saying, and this morning also in a particular program which I had participated in, I said, India has won the proxy war, but Pakistan has not lost it. You see, it is the capability of Pakistan is still there to generate something more beyond. So what you're finding, in my opinion, what you're finding at the moment are the last embers of terror. You've reduced the strength from 3,500, 4,000 terrorists who used to roam the countryside in big bands of people together, is now reduced to 60 to 75 to 90 people. And they're floundering around. But there will be opportunities when they will come together at some stage. Now, this particular encounter was 3 terrorists perhaps. But 3 terrorists can cause quite a bit of a mayhem for quite some time. And the search operation had to be extended because you cannot just call off an operation after you've had casualties. So obviously, we will get our successes. It's an interesting thing also to point out to you, the ratio of our losses to the number of terrorists killed. In the 90s, the ratio was 1:9. When the strength of terrorists was 3,500, 4,000. As the strength started dwindling down, actually the ratio started going into the favor of the terrorists. In 2017-18 at one stage, we were almost 1:1, which was very awkward. Because what happens is that as the strength comes down, you get fewer kills, you tend to get worked up much more, you work harder, you build up your intelligence, you conduct operations, and then you make mistakes here and there. And that's what the terrorists exploit. These are things about terrorism which are rarely known. But this is true on the ground. This is how it happens.
So one of the things that occurred to me was because of the abrogation of 370 and designation of Jammu and Kashmir now as a union territory, the security aspect of the entire region or territory is directly under central command now in Delhi rather than local police, etc. Is that perhaps the single biggest reason why the violence and terrorism has come down? Because there is direct central
oversight.
Oversight
as such.
That. So, which would imply that the previous arrangement, where the local police forces had a lot more say, were not that effective as the current forces are.
Maybe I would not entirely agree with you because I have served through all those periods, and I do think the central government gave the freedom to the security forces to a great extent. The only thing is that today the biggest advantage is that you have a central government and the state government from the same elements, that's from the same political elements. It's a governor's rule or president's rule, which essentially means the representatives are the choice of the central government. That's a huge advantage because earlier, for every action that the army itself took, there was tremendous resistance locally from the local administration. Many times it happened, right? It's not always that you got the fullest of cooperation. But yes, to that extent, you're right. Now with a streamlined kind of an administration, directions coming from Delhi, clearly clear-cut, not being resisted in any way in Srinagar, it has made a world of a difference, not only in the security environment, but actually in the governance environment. And I would ascribe it's made a bigger difference to governance. The fact that you just mentioned some time ago that you got a huge tourist influx. I can also tell you, you meet the Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir, Mr. Manoj Sinha, he'll be able to read out from his mind, he'll tell you all the statistics of things which have changed in the last 5 years. The government has tried to go into everything to try and satisfy the needs of the people. For example, one of the things I always used to complain to the central government and the state government, no one is bothered about the winter administration of Jammu and Kashmir. Your gas runs out, your medicines run out, your milk runs out, baby food runs out. I said, do something. This will be a great plus in terms of administration. No one bothered. Today, things are different because the Lieutenant Governor is fully sensitive to this. And there's a far better power situation there. And I've just come from Jammu and Kashmir. I was in Srinagar a couple of weeks ago. Shops are open till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. What was missing in the last 30 years was the essential capability of entertainment. People just had nothing to do with entertainment at all. There were no coffee shops, there were no Starbucks anywhere, there were no tea shops open anywhere. If a young man wanted to take his girlfriend for a cup of coffee, he didn't know where to take her, right? So it was a society which was, inside it was boiling inside with kind of a wrath. All that has come out. And today, people are happier. There are cinema halls. And there's a cinema hall open in Baramulla. Baramulla is the center from where all these issues started, right? The Inox hall there in Srinagar itself is there, drawing in lots of crowds. There are, if you go towards Ganderbal, lots and lots of new showrooms have opened up. Lots of people shopping. Kashmiris love shopping. Kashmiris love going for picnics. I found all along the meadows, people are on picnics everywhere. So I found a sense of enjoyment around. That sense of enjoyment was missing among the people earlier.
So basically, what is going to happen is that as quality of life improves in Kashmir, the people's anger and resentment at their political situation is going to obviously subside, which means that the violence, if there are more episodes, are going to be triggered from outside and the proxy war with Pakistan. A week ago, I spoke to the editor of the Force magazine. I don't know whether they've seen the Force magazine, Ghazala Wahab. She made a very provocative statement and rather counterintuitive comment that even though people think that India is a very powerful country, India has not developed the deterrence against China and Pakistan. And the example that she gives of the fact that India's deterrence is not there is this example of the Anantnag violence. It says Pakistan does not fear military punishment for its continued support for the proxy war and violence and terrorism in India. So the question to me is, now that the terrorists, Uzair Khan and his accomplice, they have discovered another body, and they're saying that there might have been 2 or 3, and they're looking for the third body. Now that the episode is over, what do you think is going to be the government's response to this? I mean, are they going to say, we won, we killed the terrorists, and that's the end of it? Or is there going to be some accountability for Pakistan? Because these people have been identified as Lashkar-e-Taiba related terrorists.
Dr. Khan, we can start recounting from the month of April 2023 as to where all operations have been conducted. We lost 5 men in Rajouri in an ambush on a military vehicle around about the end of April. Early part of May, we lost again 5 more people in the...
And those 5 were taking iftar, right?
Yes, they were taking fruits for iftar.
Yeah.
When we lost 5 people, 5 paratroopers of the special forces who had gone in for a search and destroy mission and came across a hideout, and they were in the process of reducing that hideout when they came under fire, and we unfortunately lost 5 soldiers. I was in Kashmir when we lost 3 soldiers in a place called Damal Hajipura in South Kashmir, which is not very far from where these operations are going on in Kokernag. And now we've had this. This question which you are putting has been put to me by several people in the last few days. And maybe there may be a difference of opinion between what I say and what many others also say. Is it necessary that each time this kind of a thing happened, that India is going to respond with a Balakot kind of a strike? So what Ghazala Wahab has said is actually quite right, that we may not have developed enough deterrence for it. And we need to develop that deterrence. That deterrence need not always be in the military environment or the military sphere. It can be in the field, in the diplomatic field. Yeah. And I think with India's enhancing image as a result of the G20 process, etc., you shouldn't be too far away when you find that India's demand on the international community to actually isolate Pakistan comes about. It is that kind of a pressure which can also be put on in the issue of economics. If the United States is looking at India as a strategic partner, then there should be an equal partnership. They should be concerned about what our concerns of security are vis-a-vis Pakistan or vis-a-vis China. That is not being catered for. So I see this is the work in progress which is happening at the moment. But I would never like to put pressure on my government, on the government of India, to simply out of lack of knowledge to just say tit for tat. You have to go for it. One Indian soldier killed or maybe 2 civilians killed somewhere may still be within what is called very awkward terminology, the threshold of acceptance. But that's how international relations between 2 countries that proxy war with each other. In fact, proxy war is from Pakistan, not from India, but the proxy war from Pakistan, this is how the situation develops and it continues. So we are in an awkward state at the moment, and there's no doubt about it. I am one of those who does not believe in a response each time. It's on the graded response. If something like Pulwama had happened at Kokernag on that day, I would put the pressure on the government of India to retaliate immediately. And this is what the government of India did. If you remember, with the surgical strikes in 2016 and with the Balakot strikes in 2019. And it could happen very well again. There is a lot of political pressure on the government from the public, etc. But the government takes its decisions based upon what the strategic outcome of such an action is going to be. They weigh their odds and see what is the strategic outcome of all this. And after all, India is a part of the international community, has to live with the international community. So all these ifs and buts have to find it had become a part of the overall narrative which is built up when such demands are placed on the government.
One of the techniques of negotiations is that, or how to put it. So, for example, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we later discovered that the commanding officer, the Soviet general who was in charge of the Soviet operations, he had the power to use nuclear weapons, and he had been given the authority, whereas in the American case, the power was still with the president. So the decision would have to go up. And that really later on scared a lot of us, because we thought that, oh my God, we were closer to a nuclear encounter than we had thought, because as far as the Soviet political establishment was concerned, they had already passed on the decision to the general. So I think in these tactical situations, what if this is not always a political decision to respond to the proxy war? And it becomes very clear that the commanding officer on the ground who feels that there is external threat will immediately respond. Could that be a way of deterrence to Pakistan if the signal is sent, look, this is not going to be debated in the parliament. It might even be automatic. The commanding officer right there in Anantnag decides, my God, they were responsible, and he attacks right away.
Dr. Khan, this is a very interesting issue which you have raised. But before really answering this, I must make one observation. Most people across the world have no idea where Kokernag is.
Yeah.
They have never opened a map in their life to look at where is Kokernag and where is Anantnag.
Right now,
Questions coming to me?
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
right
Go
now
ahead.
the viewers will be seeing the map.
I'm sure they will.
I will.
Because anyone who starts talking to me and I tell them, do you know where this operation is going on? They say line of control. I said it is 100 kilometers from the line of control.
It's
Do
pretty
you
much
know
inside.
that?
Yeah, yeah.
No one has an idea about this. No one knows the geography of Kashmir. When I give talks all over India, when I do it, I start with a map first. And I save a series of maps. Because unless the thing is clear in your mind as to where are you, what are you talking about on the ground, only then that clarity will come. Now, if this demand has come, this demand has definitely come to many people, I'm sure, that why the CO should be empowered, the brigade commander should be empowered, etc. In Uri, it happened near the line of control. That area was exactly 6 kilometers. I've commanded the Uri brigade. So I know 6 kilometers was the place where it happened, at the headquarters, right? This is 100 kilometers away.
Yeah.
Now, everything is graded upon, as I told you, your threshold. What is acceptable to you at a given point in time? Today, India is on a high in terms of G20. We've just had a wonderful 1 year. We are still into the 11th month, somewhere around that time. Decisions will have to take a lot of things into consideration. This kind of a tactical thing which has happened may not be allowed to go strategic. But if it was a different strategic environment, if all this was not happening and India was not on the rise in this manner, perhaps the responses could have been different. I'm only guessing they could have been different. So the dynamics here are very, very complex. It is not a clear-cut thing. The government of India cannot empower a brigade commander to launch a war on behalf of the government of India. No, that cannot happen. That I'm very, very certain about, right? There is more to it. There's more to military thinking than just allowing a person at the tactical level to take a strategic decision, which can trigger off something much, much more than what he can even fathom. So I won't agree with this kind of a response at all. It is the strategic part of it. Response ultimately is government. There was a time, yes, I do remember there was a time when the Pakistan army used to shout across the line of control to me and say, is to fire on us. And sometimes we did not have the power to fire back. So they used to say, get your orders from Indira Gandhi. This was the demeaning thing which is to talk to the Indian army at that time. Some years later, decisions were taken by the government of India and the empowerment took place. I also remember firing back the moment I received a fire, and many times proactively firing on them. Many times it happened, right? So I've been on the line of control all along, in all these areas in Poonch and Uri and places like that. So I'm talking from experience, this kind of a thing. This knee-jerk reactions are not the best form of military response. That is my surmise.
It is quite possible that one of the comments that I've spoken to a few Indian generals as how well educated and thoughtful the Indian army officers are. Especially, I get those comments a lot from across the border, people who are watching. So I have a feeling that because the Indian military officers are also so much more sophisticated, they probably deal with it in the situation is far more complex to them than it might be for their counterparts who are working with more simplistic models
You are absolutely right, Dr. Khan. You are absolutely right. I mean, it's a very pertinent observation you are making. You see, someone who is triggering it. A proxy war was triggered on the other side in '89, and that's how it all started. The initiative was with them. Till today, the initiative on all this, we are at the receiving end. A lot of people do put pressure on the army, on the government, etc. Why don't we take the initiative, right? Yes, we can take the initiative and create the same kind of conditions in Jammu and Kashmir, but somehow our principle has never been that. Our philosophy of functioning as a nation has never been that. But they, on the other side, first of all, a democracy which I can claim is not a full democracy. An army in control, an army which is in business, $26 billion of finances which are contributed to the exchequer every year. It is making conflicts and constructing advertising billboards and things like that. You see, for all of them, those orders come directly from the army headquarters, or even locally, as you say, and people are empowered to do it. They deny the presence of terrorists in POK. I can see them through my binoculars many times. Terrorists and Pakistani commanders conversing together at certain spots along the line of control. And yet you are in denial. They can remain in denial forever. So yes, you're absolutely right. The other side, the one which initiates all this, has a advantage. And they don't have to answer for anything. Something goes wrong also perhaps, although many times, let me tell you, I've homed on to many of their conversations on the radio, etc. When they have suffered severe casualties at our hands, many times they have questioned their officers, who took this decision? Who was stupid enough to do a thing like this against the Indian army and things like that? So equally, there is a lot of pressure at the ground level, even in the Pakistan army.
One of the questions from a very broad perspective about India's rise, etc. I have an ebook that came out which discusses the rise of India as a world power, the challenges that it faced. Right now, nobody is talking about if India does, if the world accepts India as a world power, then there are other responsibilities that are going to come with that. Right now, no one is talking about that. The idea is about becoming a power. But one of the barriers that are identified, and in fact, I spoke very recently with Professor Sumit Ganguly, and he says that one of the things that is preventing India from becoming a truly major player on the international arena is this ongoing, endless rivalry with Pakistan. And India, and he used the phrase, terminate this rivalry. So how do you see? I mean, I also think that it bleeds resources. It causes disruption on the border states. It's not just affecting Kashmir, it's also affecting Punjab, where there are all these drones that are flying across with cash and guns and drugs. So it is critical for India in order to focus on development and other aspects, to be able to terminate this rivalry with Pakistan. And how do you see the chances of such a thing happening in the near future?
I am quite confident that we are far from a situation where we can normalize relations with Pakistan. And normalization will start perhaps with some talks. Those talks will not take place now that India has declared its policy very clearly since 2016 that we will not talk until Pakistan completely admits to its proxy role in Jammu and Kashmir and stops all proxy activities involved in the support of terror. That Pakistan is not likely to do. I don't think the international community is in a position to be able to pressurize Pakistan to be able to do it. India alone may not be able to do it. Even the international community may not be able to do it. Pakistan has got a certain geostrategic location on the map of the world, which makes it a very unique nation to which so many players gravitate for advantage. The Chinese, Russians are concerned about Central Asia. The Chinese are always concerned about the Belt and Road Initiative, their access to the Indian Ocean, etc. The United States, for the balance of what is happening in Afghanistan, to balance out that activity by Pakistan, they would empower Pakistan. Ultimately, NATO has fallen back on Pakistan to get ammunition for Ukraine. $600 million have just exchanged hands to get ammunition from Pakistan, of all nations. No other nation in the world could provide it at that time. So I see it's an international system which is propping up Pakistan, propping up the government of Pakistan, and propping up this propensity to do all these activities against India. If it was not there, if the international support was not there, Pakistan could not have survived, could not have even hoped to think of a thing like this. For example, the demand by Pakistan, I think, on the IMF was this tranche was about $1.2 billion to pay off certain debts. Yeah. But the moment it provided the ammunition for Ukraine, this whole thing increased to $3 billion and more. $600 million came in as a result of the sale of that ammunition. So you see, Pakistan is being propped up internationally. What can India do on that? That is the question. How can we have been trying for the better part of the last many years diplomatically to pressurize and make sure, except for statements like the one which Hillary Clinton made about snakes in your in your backyard, etc. No one has gone about doing anything. Everyone knows the snakes are there. There are friendly and unfriendly terrorists. There are India-focused terrorists and terrorists which are being bred within which are there within Pakistan, creating a nuisance for Pakistan itself, and yet Pakistan is in denial. So I see this situation festering for a fairly long time from now onwards. 2015, a sincere effort was made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. If you remember, 1 year he waited from 2014. And then the process started. UFA. From UFA, he sent the National Security Advisor to Bangkok to meet the Pakistan NSA. Sushma Swarajji, the late Sushma Swarajji, the foreign minister at that time, went to Pakistan for the Heart of Asia conference. And then Mr. Modi himself made a dash to Lahore from Kabul. I mean, what more could Pakistan have wanted? What more could have the international community wanted? A new government in India, within a year and a half, they've read the situation and they looked for peace. But we received only a slap on the face for that. Pathankot within 7 days. Uri, which happened within 8-9 months, and Nagrota thereafter. So I think every time that an effort and initiative has been taken by India, the deep state in Pakistan, which Pakistan is run by the deep state, it's not run by the government of Pakistan. Yeah. The deep state of Pakistan ensures that this peace process cannot come about. Because there are huge stakes in this. There are huge money stakes, financial stakes involved in hundreds of families who are probably benefiting from this, and the Pakistan army, which has the biggest takeaway from it.
I mean, the Kashmir issue is the reason why there is so much disproportionately large allocation of resources and power to the Pakistani military. And the fact that they have created all these proxies, these tiny, tiny monsters, which they don't control anymore. So Pakistan, I think, is hostage to its own foreign policy, which means that its past actions and past decisions now dictate its future. And I
would have agreed with you more on this, but if I may just make a statement. Sure. 6 years, General Bajwa was the chief of the army staff in the Pakistan army for 6 years. And at different stages, he did make these comments from time to time, pertinent comments. And in the Islamabad strategic dialogue, I think in 2021 and 22, both he made those particular statements that is the time has come for peace. Exactly what Mr. Modi had told Mr. Putin at Tashkent, if you remember, in August 2022.
This is not
the season for war. This is not the season for war. What wise words from the Indian Prime Minister. But this is the words which Bajwa was speaking, but he didn't have the courage to be able to take this forward. He was virtually the CEO of Pakistan as the Pakistan Army Chief. He could have made a difference to it. But he knew that he is hostage to all the happenings within the deep state. But he had the courage once in a while to make an opening somewhere in the security dialogue or in what is called the very famous media conference, which turned out to become the Bajwa Doctrine, which happened in Rawalpindi at some stage in 2016 or 17. And the Bajwa Doctrine was only this, that the time has come for Pakistan to have peace with India. But then he would always put a rider and say it is for India to resolve Kashmir internally first, to stop the human rights violations and stop all this. I mean, with these kind of allegations, you're not going to find any stomach for peace in Pakistan.
Sir, this is my last question for you. Besides the LOC, there is also this whole crisis on the other front with China that is ongoing, and the latest episode with the maps that China has published,
yes.
It clearly sends that the hope that was raised in Johannesburg that there will be a dialogue, and also the 19 military to military discussions that have taken place have all not borne any fruit. So there are some analysts and some thinkers who fear that that China could continue to put pressure on India, and another way in which it could escalate is through Pakistan, using Pakistan to create problems for India. Do you see that happening in the near future, that the more India becomes closer to the US, more embedded in the Quad and Western politics, the more China is going to resent that and eventually try and use Pakistan or some other means to put pressure on India, especially along the entire border. It's like 2,000 miles.
Your analogy is bang on, absolutely correct. And I start by saying whatever happened in April, May of 2020 happened purely because the Chinese were worried. The Chinese leadership was worried that India's strategic confidence was on the rise. And I always surmise this from a chain of events. If you go through 2016 to 2019, you will find the decisions taken, strategic decisions taken, starting with the surgical strikes, the Operation All Out in Jammu and Kashmir, which led to a large number of terrorists being killed. Doklam, the handling of Doklam for 72 days in 2017. 2018, 19, you found Pulwama happened and Balakot took place. Thereafter, the decision of 5th of August 2019, all of them seen individually make no sense strategically. Okay, something has happened. But when you see this in a continuum, and you're sitting across a border and watching a country like India from there, you will realize this is a country on the march. This is a country which is gaining its strategic confidence. It didn't have that before, the ability to take decisions, the ability to go across borders, to secure itself more proactively. And that is why the Chinese came to strike that strategic confidence. A bit of wolf warrior diplomacy and things like that happened. They tried it directly. Anyone who was reading the situation could make out 50,000 troops in Ladakh is chicken feed. You can't even take one segment of Ladakh with 50,000 troops. So we put 50,000 troops as a mirror deployment within 2 months out there. So what it was nothing but a bit of coercion. And all this which is happening, these 19 rounds of talks, is just to keep the pot boiling, the fires burning. China is not seeking peace. China wants to keep repeating this year on year so that India's focus and attention is entirely on the Himalayas. And they also know that India is alone when it comes to the Himalayas. No one is going to come to India's assistance. India is on its own in the Himalayas, and therefore India has a traditional mindset of being continental. Territory is very important for India. While actually, if you really look at it, it's the maritime zone, which is China's vulnerability, and we can be our strength because that's where Exercise Malabar, which started in 1991, jointness of the navies of international navies around the world can come together and put an end to China's rise. China's rise has taken place because of assured energy from the Middle East through these sea lines of communication, through the Straits of Malacca, and the return container traffic which has gone to the markets in India, that's the whole of South Asia, in the Middle East and Africa, and on to Europe. That's how the Chinese economy has been doing. Everything is endangered.
You point out to something which is quite in a way, from a strategic perspective, very funny. So, for example, the United States Indo-Pacific strategy insists that the goal is to keep the entire Indo-Pacific and sea lines free and open. But what is not discussed much is that the biggest beneficiary of that has been China for the last 30 years.
Absolutely.
The biggest trade, the amount of trade that China
that they have been doing, that is absolutely true. And this is what worries them. They're worried that a country like India will balance out its security approach and give more emphasis on the maritime zone, and therefore it can become a major force multiplier for the United States. Yeah. That is what the Indo-Pacific strategy is all about. It can be all about. So, you see, yes, the Chinese did it, and the Chinese can do what you have said through Pakistan. But the Sino-Pakistan link, security link, is a lot of lip service. They provide them with money, they provide them with infrastructure, they provide them with a lot of weaponry, etc., technology. But in heart of hearts, Pakistanis are neither with the Chinese, neither with the Americans. Both sides they shun. You've seen the attacks on the Chinese taking place in Gwadar and other areas like that. You've seen primarily the rank and file of Pakistan, the lower strata of society, is all anti-American.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't think the Chinese really trust Pakistan enough to be able to do these kind of things. And proxy war, an enhanced proxy war of the type which people imagine that you can go back to 1989, is no longer possible in the Indian context.
General Atta Hasnain, thank you very much for being on Khanversations, and as always, shining light on the strategic issues that Indian military and Indian security policy faces. I send my condolences to all the people who lost such brave soldiers, 4 of them, and also to those families whose children are sucked into this terrorism thing. Imagine dying at the age of 20, 25, and you could be spending the next 50 years enjoying this world, making a positive contribution to it. And not only that, when these terrorists when young people join these organizations, they may die, but they also create lots of problems for their own families going
Absolutely.
forward.
Absolutely.
So condolences to people, and I hope that Kashmir is one of the most beautiful places in the world. I've been there in 1986. I hope that there is more peace, more prosperity, more happiness in the valley. You know, as they say, that if there is heaven on earth, it is in
there.
Kashmir. It is in Kashmir. It is. Thank you very much again, General
Thank
Saab.
you very much, Dr. Khan. Thank you so much for your.
Yes, and those of you who've been watching, please subscribe to Khanversations, ring the bell icon, like the video, and share it with your friends. Thank you very much again.
And I particularly appreciate your condolences to the families of our soldiers, our very, very brave soldiers. That is something we must never forget.
Thank you.